I want to begin with what should not be business and the environment, with what I will describe, I'm sorry to say this, as a business school professor sometime in 2050, speaking with, I presume, his grandchildren, saying, yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. This is one of my favorite cartoons, and sometimes I hope that's not going to be me, but I think there are reasons to be positive, so let me describe these. Well, firstly, with apologies to the Roman Catholics and the Pope, I actually believe the corporation is the most important institution of our time. Reason is that it's the mainstay of the economy, the engine of the economy. 2/3 of the economy measured in terms of GDP or jobs is private sector. In the US, as you can see here, in fact, it's more like 3/4, or 74%. Under the circumstances, frankly, any concept that suggests that there should be a green economy or a transition to a circular economy or any kind of transition in the world which changes things is meaningless unless it focuses on how exactly is this going to be delivered through the engine of the economy that is the corporation. Today, most of the economy is private sector, and the corporation is the main vehicle of the private sector. So very quickly, I want to just focus on the private sector and see what is the problem. Well, one of the challenges with the private sector is that because it is free to do business, and there is a history, because it is free to do business without paying attention to externalities, because it is seeing itself today as effectively a vehicle to create value for shareholders, not necessarily a vehicle with social purpose, the net result tends to be externalities, which is all about privatizing profits and externalizing costs. Externalities are third-party impacts of doing business as usual. If I'm a car maker, I make a car, I make a profit, I'm happy. If you buy the car, ma'am, and you drive it, family, friends, etc., you're happy. But maybe you're not happy because my emissions caused a problem with your beach home somewhere near the Cape. And maybe, sir, you're not happy because the emissions of the car that I made, which she drove, has caused you a lung problem. So you are the sufferers of the externalities of a perfectly legal transaction between me, the car maker, and she, the car driver. How big are these externalities is the surprising thing. We are talking here about, for the top 3,000 companies, $2.1 trillion. Collectively for the private sector, $7 to $8 trillion. That's like 11-12% of the global economy. That's the annual cost of damage impacts on, if we look at what these are, essentially we are talking about greenhouse gas emissions, water abstraction, air pollution, natural resource use, and so on. And these costs come home to roost, and in some cases more than others. When I say some cases, here's a study that was done by the TEEB group, the TEEB for Business, which worked out sector by sector and region by region what were the largest areas of externalities. So common sense would tell you that, yes, it should not be a surprise that coal power generation is amongst the largest. Eastern Asia, read China. Northern America, read USA. So these are large ones, and you'd expect that. $450 billion of externalities for a sector that is only generating $443 billion of revenue, and likewise in the case of North America. The odd one here is number 2 in this list of by sector, by region externalities. Cattle ranching and farming in South America. Read Brazil. Why would this be? Well, this is because of the sheer size of the impacts of the cattle industry in Brazil. The average number of heads per hectare is 1. That's 195 million heads of cattle in 196 million hectares of land. And if we account for the costs of destruction of the forest that has created that space for grazing, and if we account for the social costs of the emissions of the cattle, and if we account for the water usage of these animals, that's what that number becomes. And unlike the other sectors where the cost to society, the third-party cost, the social damage due to climate change, etc., climate change, pollution, and building damage, these are the 3 big things that are the results of coal-fired power stations. In the case of cattle ranching and farming, these externalities are almost 18 times the size of the revenue of that sector. Now, as an economist, when you look at externalities, as in social costs of 18 times the size of the revenue of that business, you begin to think, oops, where's this going? What's going on here, right? And this is the challenge, because this is not the only such case where the externalities are bigger, much bigger in this instance, than actually the revenue or the value generation or the value addition of that sector. This, my friends, this idea of externalities being not accounted for, not measured, not managed, is the biggest free lunch in the history of the universe. And the question is, who pays for it? Well, the sad news is you do. All of you do, I do, we all do.